Chapter 10. The Very Worst Day. That Monday was an unsqueakably difficult day, more difficult than the day we had last year in room 26. First, Thomas said that he'd seen a wolf while he was walking to school, but Mrs. Brisbane got him to admit it might have been a big dog. Mrs. Brisbane reminded him not to exaggerate. Worse yet, Phoebe had forgotten her spelling homework and burst into tears, which made me feel sad, sad, sad. Next, Miss Brisbane asked Paul to come up to the board for some math problems, and both Small Paul and Tall Paul jumped out of their seats. When they got up to the board at the same time, they glared at each other. The other students laughed. Sorry, guys, I meant Paul G. Miss Brisbane explained. Tall Paul turned red, and Small Paul scowled as he returned to his seat. Small Paul liked to do math problems in front of the class. Tall Paul got the problem wrong and turned an even deeper shade of red. As if that wasn't bad enough, Kelsey skinned her knee at recess and had to go to the nurse's office. Then Miss Brisbane had an excellent idea, as she often does. She decided to put me in my ball and let me roll up and down the aisles. She probably wanted to get her students' mind off their problems. It should be very interesting if all humans could get a hamster eye view of their world at least once. If they did, they would probably clean their shoes more often. There really are unsqueakably awful things stuck to the bottom of many shoes. Humans should pay more attention to their socks, too. On that day, both Thomas and Kelsey had on mismatched socks. They'd also realized how much they tap their feet and move around in general. Even when they think they're sitting still, as I spin around the classroom, I'm always glad, glad, glad I have the ball to protect me. Despite the dangers, I kept rolling around lazily. The students were reading to themselves and after a while didn't even seem to notice me. As I approached Rosie's table, I decided it would be interesting to get a closer look at her wheelchair. I still hadn't figured out exactly how she would pop a wheelie. Rosie saw me coming closer and her eyes sparkled. Hi, Humphrey, she whispered. But when I got closer, Holly let out a yelp and grabbed my hamster ball, picking it up so quickly I was doing somersaults inside. Eek, I squeaked. What is it, Holly? The teacher asked. Humphrey could trip up Rosie's wheelchair. He got way too close, she said, holding up the ball, but I've got him now. He wasn't too close, Rosie protested. I saw him there. I think it's dangerous, Holly said. The way you picked him up is dangerous, Rosie replied. You could have hurt poor little Humphrey. I don't like to think of myself as a poor little anything, but she was right. I wasn't hurt, but I was definitely dizzy. You must remember to be gentle with Humphrey, Miss Brisbane said as she took the ball from Holly. She peered in through the yellow plastic. Are you all right? I squeaked, though it was a weaker squeak than usual. Miss Brisbane put me back in my cage, satisfied that I was okay. I headed straight for my sleeping hut, which was the safest place I knew. I crawled out a little while later when I heard Rolling Rosie ask if she could speak to Miss Brisbane. The room was empty because it was lunchtime. You didn't pop a wheelie again, did you, Rosie? The teacher asked. No, Rosie answered. It's about my assistant. Holly, Miss Brisbane said, why don't you tell me what's on your mind? Rosie wheeled up close to the desk and she and Miss Brisbane talked. OG and I were as silent as could be so we could hear every word they said. I don't think I need an assistant, she explained. I can do almost everything myself. So could you tell Holly not to help me anymore? Miss Brisbane was silent for a moment. I could, she finally said, but do you really want me to? Yes, Rosie answered. I know Holly wants to help, but she helps way too much. She helps me when there's no problem at all. Sometimes she gets in the way. Have you told her that, Miss Brisbane asked? Rolling Rosie nodded. I said she didn't need help so much. It didn't work. Again, Miss Brisbane was silent for a while. I can see you don't need much help, Rosie, but maybe Holly does, she finally said. Holly? Rose sounded really, really, really surprised. She likes the help. Miss Brisbane explained, I think she'd be pretty upset if I said you didn't need her help anymore. Maybe she could help someone else, Rosie suggested. Let's give her one more chance, Rosie, Miss Brisbane said. I'll have a word with her and see if things improve, okay? Good old Miss Brisbane. She really knew how to handle students. Now we better eat. I'm going down to the lunchroom too, she said. As they headed out the classroom, I couldn't wait to talk to OG. Were you listening, OG? I asked my neighbor. Helpful Holly will be upset if she gets fired. I knew that because I'd be unsqueakably upset if I got fired from my job as a classroom hamster. Boing, 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 OG agreed, splashing in his water. The thought of the day would never end, but at last the afternoon bell rang. As the students gathered up their backpacks, Miss Brisbane took a sheet of orange paper and approached Phoebe. Phoebe, I have an idea to help you remember your homework, she said. Each day, you'll put a big, colorful reminder in your book bag so you won't miss it. What do you think? Okay, Phoebe said. I've written your homework assignment on it. All you have to do is remember to bring it back. Miss Brisbane continued. Phoebe nodded. I will, she promised. You can do it, Phoebe, I squeaked. Then I hopped on my wheel and started spinning as fast as I could. I think she was smiling when she left the room. The day took a turn for the better after school when some of my friends from last year came back to room 26. There was Raise Your Hand Heidi, Hopper and her best friend, Stop Giggling Gail, Morgenstern, and along with repeated pleas, Richie Rinaldi. I was spinning on my wheel when they came in, and I was glad to see them. I stopped suddenly and almost tumbled off. Please don't make sudden stops when you're spinning on a wheel. Hi, 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 I squeaked. I'm not sure they could hear me over the loud splashing sounds OG was making. Humphrey, my favorite hamster, Heidi said as she rushed up to my cage. Gail giggled. OG, my favorite frog, she said as she hurried to my friend's tank. And you're my favorite teacher, Richie told Miss Brisbane. Thank you, Richie, she replied. But you have to give Miss Becker a chance. She's an excellent teacher. I know, Richie said. But then she doesn't have any classroom pets. Heidi leaned in close to my cage. I'm doing pretty well raising my hand this year, Humphrey, she told me. That was unsqueakably good news. Miss Brisbane and I had worked to help her in her bad habit. Boing, boing, OG twang, sending Gail into peals of laughter. I don't think Gail could ever stop giggling completely. At least I hope not. I was glad to see my old friends from last year jump on my wheel, and I started spinning fast, which made them all giggle. Go, Humphrey, Richie said. Then OG decided to dive into the water side of his tank and made an extra big splash, which made them giggle even louder. Awesome, OG, Heidi said. I think OG and Humphrey are glad to see you. Miss Brisbane said, Oh, Miss Brisbane, we missed them so much, Heidi said. We came to ask something important. I slowed down the wheel. You say it, Richie, Gail said. Okay. Richie suddenly looked serious and he cleared his throat. Miss Brisbane, we don't think it's fair that you have two classroom pets in room 26, and we don't have any in room 18. We were hoping you would donate one of yours to Miss Becker. Thank goodness I hopped off my wheel or I'd have fallen over. I was really, really, really surprised. And so was Miss Brisbane. Goodness, I don't think my students would like that, she said. If Miss Becker wants a classroom pet, she can get her own, but I'm not sure that she wants one. She liked Humphrey or OG. Everybody does, Gil said. And OG came here from another classroom, Heidi said. At least after, please, Richie begged. Miss Brisbane was unusually quiet. I was too, and I didn't hear a boing or a splash from OG. Please? Gail looked so serious, I could hardly believe it was her speaking. Please, added Heidi. At least Miss Brisbane spoke. To tell you the truth, I can't imagine giving up either one of them. Don't you think they miss each other? Heidi and Gail glanced at each other. They weren't always together. Humphrey was alone in the beginning, Richie said. I had to squeak up for myself. But it was so lonely at night, even scary. I'd almost forgotten how loud the click sounded in the empty room, and how long the nights were without someone splashing nearby. Boing, boing. OG agreed. Boing, boing, boing. That made Gail giggle, of course. Miss Brisbane smiled. I'll tell you what, I'll think about it. I'll talk to Miss Becker about classroom pets, but I'm not sure it's a good idea to separate Humphrey and OG and take one away from my class. Thanks, Miss Brisbane. We've really missed them, Richie said. They chatted with the teacher for a few more minutes, and then it was time for them to go home. After they left, Mrs. Brisbane leaned in close to my cage and stared at me. To tell the truth, I can't imagine teaching without you and OG to help me, she said. Am I just being selfish? No, no, no. I squeaked at the top of my lungs. Miss Brisbane chuckled. I didn't think Arlene Becker wants any classroom pets. Not even you, she said. So don't worry. Thanks, I squeaked. I won't. But I did. I worried and worried and worried some more. And even though he hatched from an egg and was cold blooded, I could tell that OG was worried too.